Well, hello everyone. This is Zach Brooks from World Transplant Athletes. If you have a body with a new part, you are a World Transplant Athlete. You can follow us at World Transplant Athletes on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and your social media platform of choice. We have a team of 20 organ transplant recipients from 11 countries who speak 6 languages on every continent, working behind the scenes to make content for you. Today, we're doing a podcast called Friends of World Transplant Athletes to celebrate and support groups anywhere and everywhere that are either led by an organ transplant recipient or recipients or have recipients as their primary focus. Today, we're super lucky to be talking to Jenny McFarlane of the Pre to Post Transplant Foundation. The Pre to Post Transplant Foundation is dedicated to making small changes easier for soon to be recipients, caregivers, living donors, and donor family members through a buddy program, short term accommodations, and some cleaning programs. So, Jenny, thank you so much for joining the show. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Zach. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, I already introduced you, but tell the audience a little about you, your name, where you're from, and which transplant you had.
Okay, so my name is Jenny McFarlane. I live in the Southwest. I live in El Paso, Texas right now, and I am originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I moved to Houston, Texas to get a double lung transplant recipient back in 2018 due to a lung condition called cystic fibrosis.
Great. How long before, like, how long did you know you needed to have a transplant? Was it an acute kind of thing, or did you know for a long time of your life? What was your lead up story?
So typically when you have cystic fibrosis, you end up getting a transplant. So I kind of always knew, but it became official about maybe 2 years before I actually had the transplant. And so that was when we started talking about it. And then I started my evaluation the first of the year in 2018. So it took about 9 months to get the actual transplant, but it was kind of always in the back of my mind just because cystic fibrosis and having a transplant is so common. Almost everybody gets one. Although, they're doing great things in the health community right now. So they're doing great things to help CF patients. So
Yeah. So what I understand, and just from other kind of work I've done, is that in the term cystic fibrosis, the healthcare today is able to enable people to live with their condition healthier longer before even needing to consider a transplant. Is that correct?
oh
Is that
yeah.
kind of the information you have?
Yeah, for sure. Whenever I was born, the doctors gave me my mom a prognosis of, I think it was like 5 or 10 years. And so as I've gone along, they've come out with so many great things that you can do to help manage the CF and live longer. And even since my transplant, they've come up with some miracle medications that have helped people prolong their transplant process for years. So it's really coming along. They're close to a cure, and hopefully soon that they can figure that out and find a way to cure us. So
What are the kind of treatments they've come up with so far that it has made this kind of miracle possible that, people
yeah.
don't need to even consider a transplant until much later and can live longer at a healthy.
So right after I got my transplant, there was this drug that came out called Trikafta, and just watching people mostly on social media talk about this drug, how their lung function went from 50% and it bounced up to 60 or 70% is what I consider a miracle, because when I
Oh
was
my
at
gosh.
50%, I would give anything to be back at 70% lung function. So it's just I'm not even sure. I think it's just a pill that they took. Could be inhaled. I can't remember. I never took the drug, so I don't know, but it's really been great for the CF community.
Wonderful. In my other life, I'm co-founder of a startup company with gene editing as its focus, and chronic fibrosis, cystic fibrosis is one of the conditions that a lot of people have their eye on, because it really comes from one genetic alteration. And if you can figure out that alteration, you can find some good gene therapies that approach the problem at a very root level, as opposed to trying to medicate everything from the top level. So it's a very attractive thing for that community. So maybe that's what you're talking about in terms of breakthrough.
Yeah, it is. And the cystic fibrosis gene problem, there's so many different variations of it and
Mm-hmm.
severities. And so it's hard for them to come up with medications that treat all of them. So you can have somebody with CF who has a different mutation than another person. And so I know that this Trikafta was developed for like the most common gene, which they call Delta 508. And so they've got a long way to go as far as treating every mutation. But I think that, once they find the first one, then it's probably going to be easier to, develop it for all of them. So it's
Sure.
been really great. Yeah. And they've, throughout my, oh, sorry,
throughout your life.
throughout my childhood and growing up, they've always come out with a new drug to try. And of course, I tried almost all of them, and they've all helped in some way. And they helped me live until I was 39 before I needed a transplant. And I've been very lucky with that, because a lot of CF patients have to get a transplant at an earlier age than I did. So I was very lucky. And I've always been really good about taking the medications that they find. And so I don't know, they do great things. Like, great things are coming too. So
Awesome. Well, thanks for that divergence in the field of cystic fibrosis. So the rest of the podcast is really about your organization, pre to post transplant foundation. How long have you been doing it, and what are the main messages? So we can just start with that first question. Is tell us a little bit about the organization.
okay, so it was formed back in 2021. And so our first year was mostly, just developing programs and getting everything together. And it wasn't until last year that we really started seeing our foundation help people. And we are still pretty small, so we have a long ways to go and a long ways to grow. But slowly we're growing. And I decided to start this foundation because I've always been the kind of person that likes to help people and give back. And I really wanted to do something for my fellow organ donation community. So I started this foundation, and I found a great team to help me with it. And we want to be a foundation that is kind of a huge resource in all aspects of organ donation, not just focus on one particular thing, because there's so many different things about transplantation and organ donation. It's hard to just pick one thing because we go through so much. So what we do in our foundation right now is, one, we have a buddy program, and the buddy program is for the entire country. You can sign up. It's like a mentorship, and it's a great program especially for pre-transplant members, because you're getting ready for your transplant and you're scared and you don't know anything even after going through evaluation. And so it's always good to have that person that's kind of mentoring you, who's been there before you, who's already gone through this. They can be there with you throughout your journey, and you can call them. I had signed up
Yeah.
through a different program before mine, and I had a mentor that I worked with, and she was always open to questions, and I always felt really great talking to her, because before my transplant, I had, you have tons of family support and friends, but nobody really knows what you're going through. So it's nice to have that person to reach out to and be like, hey, this is what I'm feeling. and what kind of advice do you have for me? So we have that buddy program, and it's not just for recipients. We have it for caregivers and living
Mm,
donors and um, donor family members. So they can sign up to be a buddy, or they can sign up to get a buddy, and
mhm.
we match them together. We try to match them up in their same towns, but that's not always possible. We for sure
Sure.
match them up with the same organ, and we
Mhm.
try to match them up with the same problem. So, like if we have a cystic fibrosis patient, we match them up with a CF recipient too.
Yeah.
So
I know that
that's a,
I know that when I was going through my first just for a second, I'll give you some nice feedback on what you're doing is that first transplant, I've got two kidneys. There was a woman who was introduced to me really early on. I think it was like the first days that I was getting the news from doctors that my kidneys were failing. And of course, your mind is just kind of blown at that moment. At least mine was. It's like life's over and this sucks, whatever kind of things are coming up. The doctor said, "Do you want to meet someone who's gone through this already?" And I actually said no, because I didn't want to meet anyone. I didn't want to accept that this was my reality. But
yeah,
some way I just did it. I probably said to the doctor, like, well, if she really wants to come in, or probably was kind of a sarcastic remark. And I don't remember her name. I probably met her for a total of 5, but I remember she walked into the room with such like energy and excitement. And I couldn't deny that, even though I was really in a bad mood that day. I couldn't deny that. So I'm thinking to you, what you guys are doing in terms of mentoring recipient to recipient, but also expanding it is so valuable, because there is a person, like you said, that actually gets you. They don't just support you, which is not just support, but they actually can feel you from the inside, as it were, and say, oh yeah, I've been through some of these same stages. So it's really valuable what you're doing. So maybe you can talk a little bit and talk about the mentor, but to me, what's really incredible, and you've started connecting that already, is you're doing this buddy program for other members of the community. So how did you kind of come about that? Because that seems like a new take on doing a buddy program.
well, I've always thought about my husband and my mom and my grandma who were right there by my side, and I felt like caregivers also need that support. They need to be able to talk to somebody else who's been a caregiver for somebody else. And so I decided to just include everybody, because, everybody going through it, it's beneficial to have somebody who's already been there to go through it. So I just kind of threw the whole community in. Um, as far as like donor family members, we don't really get a whole lot of those, because that's a lot of times it's a sudden thing. They don't really know about the program, and they kind of have their own thoughts going on at the time, so it's available, but we don't have a lot of them. But as far as like living donors and caregivers and recipients, we kind of all go through it, so it's nice to have somebody there to go through it with you. And
Yeah,
so I thought it would be great to just include everybody in that whole thing.
yeah. Now tell me about the other two programs you have. One is the short-term housing, another was
Yeah.
cleaning service. Tell us, what are the first, I mean, for someone who's never heard this before, why? And then you can talk about, you figured out a problem to try to solve and what you're trying to do to solve it.
Yeah. So our short-term accommodations program isn't actually up and running yet. That's our big goal. That one is very expensive program to run, and we are just waiting until we're financially able to do that one. But when we do that, we want to have it available for, like, when somebody lives out of town and they've got to go to a different hospital in a different state to get their evaluation. We want to be able to provide um, you know, a hotel room, so that that's just a cost that they don't have to worry about when they're coming for the evaluation, or it's just something that they don't even have to deal with. We can have a hotel ready for them whenever they get here. So we want to give them up to 5 days for a hotel room.
Okay.
And we also want to make it easier on the families whenever their loved one is going through surgery, and not have to worry about where they're going to stay, or if they live, a little bit further away. Um, then they can be closer to the hospital, so they can be closer to their loved one going through surgery. We want to give them a hotel room for 5 days also. And so
Hmm.
that's the goal. Like I said, it's not up and running yet, but we're working on that part right now. And then our cleaning program is a wonderful, wonderful program. So, especially for lung recipients and heart recipients, it is imperative that you are germ free after transplant.
Hmm.
You're so immunocompromised, your body's in shock. And so it's important that whenever you
Mm.
go home from the hospital, you are able to go into a clean environment. So our cleaning program is a program where they can sign up and a few days before they go home or discharged from their surgery, um, we send in a cleaning company to go in and clean their home one time for free. And that way that they can come home and not have to worry about getting the house cleaned. The caregivers don't have to focus on that. They can just focus on their loved one and help them heal. And so right now, that program is based out of Houston, and we are just going into Dallas now. So um, it, it's just, and it's not just because of COVID, right? So the big thing was COVID is here, everything needs to be clean. But, you know, after your transplant, you've got to have
Yeah.
like cleanness around you because you can't have germs because you're so immunocompromised. So this is a great program for those people to come in and get their house cleaned, and that way they don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Like that's the
What
biggest thing
strikes
for the
me?
foundation is we want to make
What's that?
sure that that's the biggest thing for the foundation is we would just want to make transplant process easier on whoever's going
Mm.
through it or whoever's going through it with their loved one.
Yeah, I mean, what is coming across, this is the second time we've spoke, and now I'm investigating, looking up your information a little bit more and talking to you is your absolute focus on easier. That's your word, but I was just feeling like this word ease, like you're trying to ease every micro step of the process for everyone involved. And I just
Right.
think it was remarkable. And the reason, I think it's remarkable. So if you're in a startup company, for example, you go through oftentimes a validation process to really try to figure out exactly what the customer needs. I'm doing that with a current startup company, so this is very much real in my life outside of World Transplant Athletes. And it feels like, you and your team um, have thought in very much micro detail about so many steps of the process and so many people involved in the process. So I'm just really struck by the details of your thought process and fusing that into your foundation. Where do you think that really detailed approach that equates to this ease, this easiness kind of thing you're doing, where did it come from? Because it really strikes me as something that's really remarkable about your group versus other groups doing remarkable things. Where do you think that comes from, Jenny?
I think for me, it's just part of my nature because
Okay.
before transplant, when I lived in Albuquerque, I had another Christmas foundation where I was trying to help families, give Christmas presents to their children who couldn't afford it. And so I've always been so blessed with everything in my life. I always have had a great support system around me and all the help I ever needed. And some people just don't have that. And sometimes challenges like transplant are greater than what I've ever experienced. And I want people to have what I have. Like I want people to be as blessed and
Hmm.
have things as easy as I do. And I know that there's a bunch of people out there who don't. And then you take something like transplant and like there's so many different aspects of transplant that you have to worry about. You have the financial part of it.
Yeah.
You have the demographics. You have like 100 doctors and all these things that you have to do, like a whole new lifestyle that you have to adjust to. And so if I can do something to help people have it a little bit easier or have like the things that I have that I'm blessed with, then that's just what I have to do. Like that's what I want to do, and that's just who I am as a person. And I found some amazing people who are just like that, and they're my board
Okay.
members, and they're my team members, and
Wow.
we all work so great together, and we all want the same thing. We want people to have it easier. So,
Wow. That's fantastic. I almost want to end it right there because it's such a nice final message. But maybe you can kind of summarize, because it's the question I usually ask of the participants of this podcast. What's the main message for the pre-post transplant foundation?
the main message I would say is you don't have to do this by yourself. You have a
Mm,
whole community of people around you that will be with you and help you get through it. And you have the Pre to Post Transplant Foundation that's going to stand with you and be by your side through the whole process if we are allowed to.
wow. Jenny, thank you so much for taking some time and talking to me today on behalf of the World Transplant Athletes organization. Thank you. You're fantastic, and we're looking forward to seeing your work and helping you grow if to the extent we're able. But we're really excited about knowing about you and your team. Just really fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you letting me come here and share my foundation with everybody. And if anybody wants some more information about it, then they can visit our website at www.pretopost.com or .org, and or they can reach out to me directly, and we can see what we can do for them.
Great. Thanks so much, Jenny. Have a good day.
Okay, you too. Thank you.
Bye bye.